first round of roundtables. This is the last session we're having. We had 2 last week and then the Central region just Monday. And so tonight we kind of, it's hard to know how to break things up. So we decided we were gonna just for this time around kind of group together the West and the Gulf and all through Central and South America. So Lori and I were saying maybe if this is something we want to do every year, which we'd love to, we could potentially offer this in January or February, where hopefully more people are free. So that's something to think about. So I know most of you, but my name is Julie Brown, and I am the Raptor Migration and Programs Director at HMANA. And I've been there for about 13 years, and I've been hawk watching for I guess 22 years. And I do a lot of various things at HMANA. But my favorite part of my job is connecting with all the sites and you know, providing resources and helping with data issues and things like that. Helping to set up new sites and stuff like that. So this is an idea, this roundtable idea that we had for many years, and we've never really just gotten it together. Everything is, we're always so busy, whether it's migration season or off season. And so it's just a chance to connect and kind of get to know other sites in your region, share some ideas and maybe some challenges and things that have been working for you at your site. And it's also just a great chance for us to hear, you know, what more you would like for HMANA, what we're doing well, what we should be doing, what we could be doing better. So I'm hoping it can become an annual thing on now that we have Zoom. Years ago, I was thinking, how are we going to do this regionally in person and get everybody together? And now that we have Zoom, it seems like a pretty good opportunity to bring people together from all over. So with this smaller group, we can probably just, you know, go around and introduce yourselves, maybe say your name and what site you're representing and maybe what your role is there. So Lori, you can start.
Okay. Yeah, I'm Lori Goodrich. I'm on the HMANA Board of Directors, and I'm actually in Pennsylvania, so I'm not in the region, but I'm very much involved or was involved in the Veracruz River Raptors site for many years, helps get that started. And Esther's site, who she'll talk about in Colombia, we're working with her there. So I know a lot of the at least the Mexico South sites. But yeah, I'm very interested to learn more about the Western sites and what kinds of challenges you face. So I'm glad to be on this meeting.
Right, great. I should mention that I am also a hawk watcher at the HMANA Raptor Observatory, and that's here in New Hampshire, where I am. Carol, do you want to say a few words? You're muted, though.
Okay. My name is Carol Kwiklinski. I've been hawk watching for 30 years here and there. Right now I'm working with Dinosaur Ridge Hawk Watch that's located in Colorado. I'm the, I don't know, project lead, I think. We are a small hawk watch, and last year we hired our first paid hawk counter in many, many years, over 20 years, I think, since we did this. And so we're on the road, trying to continue on that road of success. So far, so good. So it'll be nice to talk to you folks today about some of the challenges that we have.
Great, thanks. Esther, do you want to say a few words?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. Once again, my name is Esther Vallejo, and I'm the site coordinator of the count sites here in Colombia and Tolima Rocker Count and Iguacitos, Tolima. We have two located in central Colombia, and I'm happy to join here.
Great. Thanks for joining. Jamie, you're up.
Hi again. So I'm Jamie Belt. I'm at Glacier National Park in Northwest Montana, and we have a Mount Brown Hawkwatch site that we started in 2018. So I'm just excited to hear a little bit more about what others are doing to make the process efficient and to try to see if we can collaborate on getting more of our data figured out from, at least on our migration route, north and south.
Excellent. Thanks. And Eric, go ahead.
Hi. I am living the typical field biologist job and am a father of a 17-month-old. So I'm parked on the side of the road in Western Montana. I'm the head counter at MPG Ranch. And the sun is playing some tricks on me right now, as you can see. So we are a private conservation property, and we work in conjunction with partnership with Raptor View Research and Rob Dominich. And yeah, I'm just psyched to join this meeting and feel a little camaraderie with other hawk counters and see where this goes.
All right, great.
Yeah, great.
So I have a few questions we can jump into, or discussion items. You guys, I heard from some of you and got a few questions submitted from people who weren't able to make it, I guess, tonight. But something I think that is one of the biggest concerns that I hear about when I talk to hawk watchers is the issue of having counters and site coordinators aging out and recruiting volunteers and just trying to find enough people for your count, whether it's hiring counters or finding volunteers. So that's a question we can start with, and maybe share some ideas about what's worked for you. So really, some of you might remember we had a site survey that we sent out, I think it was February this year, and it was kind of in efforts to try to gauge how sites were doing, the longevity of their sites, if they saw themselves, if they had a long-term plan. And from that survey, we were asked about their plans for longevity, and 88% said that they were very confident they would be counting this year, 2022. 50% said they were confident that they would be counting in 3 years. 27% they were confident they'd be counting in 5, and just 14% said that they were confident that they would be counting in 10. So there's definitely, obviously, a lot of variables to consider, but that kind of sheds some light on the fact that a lot of sites don't have a long-term plan. The majority of sites are volunteer and are struggling to find people every year, for sure. And this survey went out to 200 site coordinators, which is about how big the network is. And we heard from 98 people total. So we got, we heard from about half the network. So for those of you that have a good crew of volunteers or staff, feel free to jump in and share what has worked for you. I have some thoughts that I can start off with, unless anybody else wants to start. All right, I'll jump in. I'll give my.
Oh,
sure.
I just wonder if we could, so I know, Carol, you're manning your site with a paid counter, but are you using volunteers as well? Maybe we could just go around and see who's using volunteers and who's using paid people.
Sure.
Yeah, we have a paid counter. She works 5 days a week. So 2 days a week, we get 4 volunteers to cover that shift, and then a volunteer to work with her for over her 5 days. So it requires quite a few people. we found that 8-hour shifts for the volunteers was way too much. That was one of the reasons why they seemed to be dropping. They couldn't hack it. These people are local bird watchers. They're not hawk watchers. And so we got them excited about it. They came up, but they couldn't take the 8. So last year we did 4, and that was much better. And that was one of the things I was curious about, if other people have ideas regarding that.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's definitely one of the questions we can jump into. And Esther, you have a paid counter or various paid counters where you are?
Yes, we have paid counters, but also we have volunteers. But the problem here is that we don't have like a lot of people that know about Raptor ID and migration. So they can go like volunteers and they are amazed with migration, but they are not very good like assistants, nor even mentioned like counters. So they cannot be used like counters. And that's why it's very complicated. So we still like invited them to visit the count site, but it's really difficult to involve them in different things like in the count itself, because they are just like taking pictures, really excited, but it's like a different process when we have the people from the training that we've been doing, and they are the ones like assistant the count. But it has been like a really slow process to have people interested in Raptor ID and the hawk watching. So that's the thing.
Okay. How about you, Eric? Are you a paid counter then where you are?
Yeah, we are fortunate at our site where I'm a full-time field biologist for MPG Ranch, so I am paid, and we are able to hire in the fall 3 additional counters paid, in the spring 2 to 3 as well. So we don't really have issues we're on a different path in terms of the volunteer thing. That's not really our issue. We do, however, struggle every year to find experienced counters for sure. Yeah, that's where we're at.
Yeah.
Okay.
So so anyways, to elaborate on that, I usually spend the first 2 weeks all day training in whoever we get to count paid.
Okay. Jamie, do you have anything to add about your site, paid versus
Sure.
volunteer?
Yeah, so we're trying to run 2 sites, one that are kind of parallel to each other. One is on a mountaintop and the other is in the valley. The reason we're doing the valley site is because we have historical data from the 80s there. And so it's a nice comparison. And also sometimes you can't see as well from the ridgetop. So it provides us a basic understanding of what's going on in some of those clouded in days. So we struggle to find people for the valley site who can come for enough time to have consistency. So that's been an issue. The mountaintop site, we have a little perk because people can stay at a really sweet fire lookout site up at the top. And so people will do 2 days in a row. And so we haven't had a huge problem getting volunteers, but what we've struggled with is getting well-trained people to serve as primaries and stick throughout the project. So we get people trained up. I mean, we're in a national park, so there's a lot of very seasonal people here who turn over every year. So we get people really nicely trained and then they're gone the next year. So that's been one of our big problems.
Yeah.
And the site it's a 4,500 foot elevation gain climb. So also finding people that either don't age out or just can handle that wear and tear in their body.
Right. That's got to be tricky.
Yeah.
Kashmir, I see that you've joined us. Thanks for coming tonight. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello. I'm Kashmir Wolf. I'm the coordinator of the River Raptors. I know some of the people that are this afternoon. And yeah, talking about the paid counters, like we basically have all the staff paid. And during the pandemic time, we got just basically 5 counters paid, and then the rest of the people was volunteers. But I think like the issue with getting well trained has been, I will say, managed in some way that actually we can like include every year new people that arrives as an assistant for the count, and then 2 years later or 30 years later they become accounters. So, and also like we help every people is like always like testing to themselves, so that way we know who is like either overestimating or underestimating, or people that needs more time to get the identifications. So that's probably like how we are and how we manage to accomplish that. And yeah, the funds, the resources are gonna be like always the key for us, because even for the volunteers we pay them a bit, so they don't have, like, for me it's like if they're not gonna make a lot of money, because the situation in Mexico is different. Like it's not easy to be a volunteer as a Mexican, because the wage that the Mexicans get. I can have volunteers from the US probably that they have a better income, that they can afford to be volunteers. But if I want to have those people, I need to be keen. So that people is gonna be at least 2 years or 3 years returning to the project. So it's more like an investment. And
Right.
sometimes I prefer to give that opportunity, that spot, to a Mexican that is by the nearby area, that I can guarantee that he's gonna be at least 3 years counting with us. Not only that, just one single season. So it's kind of tricky, but yeah, I think that's something for the subject.
So when
Mhm.
you, Cash, when you first talked to them about being a volunteer, I mean, you said you're paying them a little bit, so they're not totally volunteering. The assistants, do you kind of figure out that they can do 3 years or more, or you talk to them about that commitment?
Yeah, I always have, like, in their interview, I talk to them. I try to see what they want, like what are their plans for the closest 5 years, more or less. So I can tell, like, oh yeah, this person is really interested on raptors, or this person is really into birds in general, or want to follow a conservation path. So I'm trying to get a big idea about the person that I'm going to be hiring. So it can be something useful for another observatory, like with Jorge that we did this year. Jorge from Costa Rica, like I know he's gonna be in that observatory for quite a few years. So I talked with David, his boss, and we said, well, let's bring him so he can be trained, and then he can take wherever, like, all information from Veracruz to Costa Rica. Probably same thing with Esther.
Okay. So this is kind of different, that we have a group with mostly paid counters. That's the other few roundtables we've had. The majority have been, primarily all volunteer sites. And so do people feel like the sites who have been hiring people for a while, do you feel like that this pool of counters, potential counters, is getting smaller? I know I'm I'm hearing that certainly when I was in my 20s and 30s, it was very easy to make a living as a hawk watcher, and I hear from sites saying it's tough to find counters. It's maybe not as easy to live off stipends or make it happen, or I don't know if there's just fewer people willing to do it now. Are there thoughts on that?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, go ahead, Esther.
Yeah, well, what Cash was mentioning also happens in Colombia. Like, it's really difficult that the people volunteer because they cannot afford it, or just because, I don't know, it's like not part of the culture. Like, if you can go to another place that you can have a payment, you just don't go to volunteering. That's the trend that I've been looking here in the country. And that's one of the issues with volunteering. But also what you were mentioning, oh, sorry, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. So you were also mentioning, if maybe they can have more commitment if they are paid, or I can remember your question.
I was just wondering if people felt like there was a smaller pool of applicants to hire.
All right.
For
Yeah,
not
well,
as many hawk watchers out there willing, or it could just be a shift in what people are willing to do.
yeah,
Work.
okay, yeah. So the case here in Colombia is really particular because, well, the hawk watching is not very popular among people. So we don't have count sites like permanently for a very long time. Like the last one was like 10 years before, after, and then we opened the count sites here in Central Colombia like 3 years ago. So we don't have counters here at all. So that's why we are training the people, but it's like a really slow process here. But the idea is to have these people train the counters in the future, and like to get involved more people to have counters. Yeah.
And for volunteers that sites have been able to recruit, are these mainly birders, hawk watchers that show up at your site on a good day and kind of get hooked, or have people tried reaching out to like universities, colleges, ornithology professors? What has been the way that you have gotten your dedicated counters or volunteers? Yeah, go ahead, Carol.
I don't know how to do the hand raising thing on the computer, so I'll just do this, I guess.
Oh, yeah, it's a small enough group that you can jump in. It's down at the bottom under reactions, but you don't just jump in.
I couldn't find it anyway. Yeah, well, I've almost forgotten the question now, but we have our site is more than 30 years old, but right now we have 20 years of data in HawkCount. So there was a group of people that carried this site for a long, long time, core people in the community, and those people are now aging out. But they're still here. And when we began to build up the program again and do some fundraising, the word got out and everybody got excited. And I think that kind of spread in the community. In addition to that, we formed some partnerships with the local birding groups, with Audubon, some of just the bird groups in the state, I mean, statewide. And especially Audubon has a birder program, a training thing where they do, like they train them to be naturalists, birders, whatever. I can't remember what it's called. That program they have set up last year. We had more than 20 volunteers that they needed the hours to get their degree or whatever it is that Audubon was offering. So we had a bunch of volunteers from that. It'll be interesting to see if those people come back again. But the partnership thing seems to be really working. And the other thing it did is it got more people interested, and they started to hit that donation button on the Hawkwatch page. And so more money was coming in. And right now, surprisingly, money doesn't seem to be the issue. It's the people, getting the people. But the one thing about it, I was kind of curious what other people, sites are paying, because Denver is very expensive. And we can't offer housing right now because we haven't been able to find that partnership yet or build that partnership yet. And we pay a fairly decent, we pay minimum wage, but I think that might inhibit getting people.
Sure.
But I don't know if we're paying not enough. I mean, is that the going rate? You know, $14, $15 an hour?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it varies depending on, the state and the organization. I think that some Hawkwatch positions are hourly and others are more of a seasonal stipend or a monthly stipend. So yeah, it's a good question. I don't really know what the average is. Lori, do you have any thoughts?
Well, I'm curious what MPG is paying or Glacier, but yeah, I think we've mostly gone with a monthly stipend and then we provide housing. And that's what I think they're doing at Wagner's Gap in Pennsylvania and like Derby Hill in New York and Braddock Bay in New York. So I believe it's around, and it's usually for 5 days a week. I want to say, but don't hold me to this, it's about $2,000 a month plus housing. So I don't know how that works out as an hourly wage, but so they usually have volunteers covering weekends, so the person gets 2 days off.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Cash, do you have something to add?
Yeah, like for example, for us is it's like $500 a month, the wage, which is like a regular salary here in Mexico, and we provide the housing and about like we pretty much don't like I don't have a problem getting people involved in the project because it's like we change. There is like at least 3 people that is change every like 3 years, like in average. Can be less, can be more, but sometimes. Sorry about the noise. Yeah, it's something like that. Like I have people that it's been like more than 20, almost 20 years, and then others that have like 15 years in the project and there is others with 6 or 5 years that are been in the project with us, and seems like they're probably going to be longer, also like another 5 years at least. So yeah, it's slightly different scenario.
Mhm. Well, do people feel like, as far as training goes, it sounds like a lot of you do your training yourselves for incoming volunteers, encounters. Do you feel like that's something that is working for you, or would you be open for like some help from HMANA to do some training, either in person or like workshop you know, some Raptor ID. I know you can't do a lot of Raptor ID over Zoom, certainly, but do you feel like you would want HMANA to be more involved in training? That's something we've been talking about, just offering, you know, background on standardization and protocols and things like that. Is that something of interest to anybody? Maybe.
I think, oh, sorry, I didn't raise my hand. So I think one of the, we can do a workshop to train people. And right now we, like in ProNatura, we are working on a software that is, I remember we used to have one for training that was like just rising like crosses in the screen, and that no longer exists, got lost in so many moving between offices. And but this one, what we're trying to do is to simulate what a flock looks like at least for here, for county and a massive migration. And we can probably use that one and put it in the HMANA website, available for all the count sites. That's is not finished yet, but that probably is something that's gonna be done by the, I don't know, March of next year. But yeah, Charlie, I think training will be good.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Eric?
Yeah, on that point, for us, training is not really an issue. I mean, I think the way we do it is just fine. However, this might benefit other sites too, as well as ours. But I think just, let me back up a second. So I think this is probably similar to a lot of sites. There's a lot of counters we get, whether volunteered or paid, for sites. Like, there's a younger crew that, or at least this is true for MPG, and I think for other HawkCount sites that I'm familiar with, like the Go Shoots or Montana sites, that these potentially paid or volunteer stipend, whatever, counters are young. They're just getting into the field of birding, and they're kind of using it as a stepping stone, as like a resume builder, experience builder. Sometimes they have a little bit of bird experience at a university job. So the basic of what I'm saying is, like, they're seasonal young people from what I'm familiar with. Training, like anything that HMANA could do to keep these young, or anyone, new counters in general, just engaged with HMANA, like feel part of HMANA. Like, I guess partly what I'm getting at is, like, I train these people for 2 or 3 weeks, and I count throughout the season on like when I think good days are going to be after that. But they are in charge of entering data into HMANA for us, and they enter when they're back from the count, and then they're done, and then they leave potentially at the end of the season, and we never see them again, and they get seasonal jobs for a few more years, and who knows what happens. But I think that anything HMANA could do to just keep some of these counters engaged, feel part of the community, whether it's ID practices or whatever, like when they're on that site, because I know a lot of the counters that we have do use like Jerry Ligori's app or whatever books, and they're studying all season long. So I just think that might be a cool thing to look into in terms of building more community and more long-term involvement with some of these people who may never deal with HMANA HawkCount again, but they might be more inclined to keep at it or something if there was a little more connection.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that you raised, for sure. And yeah, I've seen that disconnect, you know, with whether it's a volunteer counter or just somebody who's at a hawkwatching. Some people who have been going to hawkwatches for 20 or more years, and they don't really know what HMANA does or who we are. So yeah, we're always open to your thoughts as to how we can engage more of the community. You know, we can send HMANA brochures free to your site if you want to distribute them. We have site flyers that we help develop with your site information and then HMANA's info on the back. But yeah, as far as actual your volunteers and your staff, I'd love people's thoughts on ways. I think over Zoom, doing something over Zoom, some training and some background on the organization and why what they're doing is important would be a great start. You know, I like that.
Yeah, maybe there's something we can come up with that if you've completed a season of counting, you get a free hat or something.
Yeah.
Or also helping them to link into future jobs or future other count sites that they can.
Yeah, I was thinking of that too, because I know 2 young hawk counters. One of them started at Hawk Mountain, now is counted at Wagner's Gap for the 2nd year, but he goes to Derby Hill in the spring. So in the fall, he's on the ridges in PA. In the spring, he's going to the Great Lakes. But if he knew that there was an opportunity in Montana or wherever, you know, you just kind of maybe some kind of network on the website where all the seasonal jobs are posted, and all the sites make their people aware of it. They might keep in the bouncing around a little bit longer.
Yeah, and Carol, you can go in just a second. I'll just add on that note, Lori, that we are trying to develop this forum on our website. And so that is in the works, and that's going to be basically a spot on our website for site coordinators and counters. So we would have a lot of, you know, more accessible like data sheets and protocols and a place to talk about whatever it is you want to discuss with people, and definitely a job posting board. We have that now on our Facebook page. A lot of our users aren't on Facebook, or they're, you know, an older generation that, you know, aren't on Facebook. So, yeah, we want to get that all in one house on the HMANA website, because often people are going to HawkCount and they don't ever go to HMANA.org. So that's an issue. Carol, sorry for the delay. Go ahead.
Oh, that's okay. Well, we have a kind of this year, a 3-tiered training program. And the first tier of it uses a PowerPoint that's mostly done by HMANA. And it is a great improvement over what we had been using. So for HMANA to provide a really good PowerPoint that we can use over Zoom, I would like to encourage that, because it's really been helpful for us to have that. The second tier this year is we're going to get Josh Haas, and he's going to do a training. So to support people to do additional trainings that are a little different than the Zoom. Josh is more in flight, more active. And that's a really good balance. And then the third tier of it is we schedule a field trip, and we take those people up, the ones that attended the trainings, up to the site in the early, before the season begins. But the HMANA PowerPoint has been excellent, and it would be great to continue that. The other thing we're doing this year, and I don't know if it's really going to keep experienced counters, it's just something we're trying this year. We're actually hiring a second employee who is a part-timer, and we targeted students or very recent graduates. And she's going to be working 2 days a week. And what we're hoping is we're going to do this more in the future. We're going to go to the universities and create a program, a partnership where we will give them training. We'll teach them how to do the research and how to identify. They'll get just a couple days a week, but then we're hoping they will come back the next season, or they'll spread the word in the university. So that's just something new this year. So far, so good with it. That's all I had. Yeah.
That's great. We do something similar here in New Hampshire. We have a great relationship with our local college and our graduate school. So every fall we have we have a paid counter. And then we have just a intern. We have an internship. And so that person somebody's usually helping the counter and learning how to count, but then also doing a lot of interpretive education. So, and sometimes we've had 2 education internships. And then they get school credit for that. So it's definitely worth reaching out to schools in your area if you have them. That in our early years, it was just purely education, and it was great to have that so the counter could focus on counting. And we've also had some luck reaching out to like homeschool networks. I don't know if how much visitation you get at all your sites, but we get a lot of homeschool groups that come up, and they tend to be the kids that come back again and again and again. And some of them have actually become our paid counters. So that if you're looking for, groups to reach out to, that's just another thought.
I gotta step off, you guys, but thanks.
Oh,
it's nice
okay.
to see all your faces.
Thanks for joining, Jamie.
Yeah.
We appreciate
Bye,
it.
everyone.
Bye-bye. Does anybody have anything else to add before we move on to a different topic?
Yeah, I guess I've got a couple things to say. One is about kind of the paid and volunteer situation. Lori was curious about what MPG does, and I can't speak to the exact pay because Raptor View actually does the paying for the counters that we have at our site. And I actually work for MPG Ranch, not Raptor View Research Institute, but I can say that I think it's on the low end. It's low enough that we barely, I think over the course of 12 years, we've had, I don't know, 2 or 3 people come back for a second season, and then they just need to find something else to do for money. So I don't know what the answer is, but money definitely seems to be an issue, both, I'm sure, obviously for volunteers. And that's all I really have to say about that. Just probably saying more of the same that everyone has to deal with. But we do provide housing, which helps, and some added benefits like snacks and food, whatever, and a chance to go up to some golden eagle trapping sites here in Montana. But the other thing I wanted to put out there was kind of along the lines of just HMANA's involvement. And this just came up to me actually after I went down to spend a week with Cash at Veracruz, my first time down there just a month ago. It was mind-blowing, as anyone who's been down there knows. And I don't know if it's possible for HMANA to do this. I don't know if it's a money thing or logistics. I'm sure you guys are tapped just as much as a lot of people, but if there could be any sort of like links to Facebook or links to videos that tie the big picture together, because every year I get the counters super jazzed about migration in general. The whole concept of it is just amazing. And I talk about how we're at a northern latitude and how as everything goes further south, and you always use Veracruz as an example, that all these birds that we're seeing are just multiplied, across the continent and get funneled, and how amazing that is. But if they could see that, if people who could just directly have links to like, wow, we counted at MPG 500 birds, which is a decent day for us. We don't get huge counts. But then they see that like 2 weeks later, Veracruz counted, whatever, 500,000, and just have some sort of really easy way for some of these folks who aren't dialed into the network on Facebook of whatever. That might be kind of a cool thing to do, and as well as providing like the ID stuff or whatever else we were talking about, but just connections to the larger picture of what's going on with hawk migration might be an interesting idea to explore if possible.
Right. Yeah, I love that idea. I'm going to volunteer myself to go down and videotape the migration in Mexico for a video. No, I think that's definitely a great idea. We'll have to give that some thought of how we can better make that connection for people, because it's mind-blowing. And yeah, a lot of people just like being out there and seeing hawks, but really tying it together and making them understand how it's all connected would be great.
Yeah, I like that idea a lot.
Okay. So moving on, another topic. I'm not sure how many of you are using paper or using Dunkadoo or remote data entry on a tablet, but that's definitely a topic that comes up a lot as more and more sites are using devices to enter data. So I think as of this year, we have TrekTalon and Dunkadoo are the two main apps, I guess, that HawkCounters are using. And I think just this year, just one site, I think Cape May is the only one that I know of, or that Jason, who runs HawkCount, knows of, that's using TrekTalon. But there's 41 sites currently using Dunkadoo. 35 were using it last year and 26 in 2020. So it's definitely catching on. And so I'm just curious to hear people's thoughts on what they use and why. I know there's a lot of mixed sites, sites that have a lot of various volunteer counters. Some of them are using tablets for data entry. Some of them never want to use it ever. And they're adamant about that. But I think there's pros and cons to both. And HMANA's interested in creating an app as well that I can talk about a little bit. But what are people's thoughts? So Cash, you use Dunkadoo and you love it, you said in the chat. Okay. Anybody else using Dunkadoo right now? Yeah, Esther is. Okay. And Carol?
Well, we're trying it this year for the first time, so no, not yet, but I am curious what the negatives are. I know what the positives are, but what troubles do people have using it?
Well, we use paper at our site. We're thinking about trying it out. But from what I have heard, I know one of the drawbacks is that it doesn't it hasn't updated for there's no updates for like the new Apple or Android phones. And that's a challenge. And I think the people at Dunkadoo just don't have the time to be working on that. So that's kind of some added pressure that's been put on HMANA and Jason Sodergren, who runs the HawkCount database. He's very interested in just creating an app that would work better. I know that Cash, do you want to talk about any cons or things that you don't like about Dunkadoo?
Yeah, one of the main complaints I used to have, and as a counter, when I was a counter, I used to experience, is like we finished the count around 7, or depending on the time of the year, but 7 in average. And then we were done with data around 8 to 9, depending on during the peak days. Like sometimes you have one missing number and you have no idea where it is. And that was always time consuming. Like people were tired, and then after 8 or 9, when data was completely done, then people have to make dinner, because in the town sometimes there is no places where to go and buy tacos in during the weekdays, like in the weekend, no problem. So with that, also like trying to translate sometimes the numbers the assistant was entering on the notebook was hard to read. And when Dunkadu appeared, it was like a miracle, like was completely like the world changed for completely. And something we noticed, or we like at the end of the day, every day we check the data to make sure we didn't have any a misidentification or something that we typed wrongly that was completely different that in the like in previous years, because you have to move between pages in the little notebook. And so I think if there will be one mistake, will be just that one and nothing else, because it was from paper, from the counters to the assistant to the notebook, from the notebook to the data sheet, from the data sheet to the computer, and then from the computer to HawkCount. So there was so many steps that can occur so many errors. So with Dunkadu was like, if there's gonna be a mistake, will be just one mistake. And at the end of the day, we're gonna just look at the data and see if there was something that looks wrong, so we can change it. And that was it. But something we like now, like I got the first tablets, and the next year we use them, they start like slowing down. So it was a kind of inconvenient that we probably need to buy one tablet every single season, so they can be like sharp and ready to handle the information every single day. We run over problems that the tablet freeze, and fortunately you can download the Google account in a mobile, in a cell phone, and continue entering the data whoever is counting that day. So we solved that problem with the main device that was set up for the count. So I think that was just an issue of having a good device ready for the season, I will say.
Cash, are you entering your data in Dunkadu at the end of the hour? You're not using it as a clicker, right?
No, we enter the data, it goes automatically, like we are connected to Wi-Fi.
No, but I mean, if I'm counting a stream of hawks, you're keeping that on the clicker, and then you enter it.
Yes. We just change the notebook from the tablet. So we collect, like if it's a flock of 300 birds, we put those 300 birds on Dunkadu. And then if there is another group of 500, we take that 500 and enter it again. Yeah, that's how we do it.
So one disadvantage I would say, Carol, I see is if you're trying to age a group of birds, not everybody does, so maybe that's not a problem. But if I'm like when the sharpshins are coming by and they're coming by really fast, it's really hard to. I mean, you could do it. You could have a clicker for your immature sharpies and a clicker for your adult sharpshins, and then you could enter those numbers separately. But sometimes what happens is everything goes down in sharpshin unknown age because it just makes it easier. But so there's probably just a little thought process there that volunteers have to work through to if you are keeping that kind of data. The other thing, Julie mentioned the phone thing, but hopefully we'll work that out with the HMANA app. We found when you have multiple counters using the Dunkadu account, that can be tricky if you don't have a way to transfer the tablet. So you almost have to use your phones, or everybody has, or there's multiple tablets, or there's somewhere locked where you put the tablet. That's what we have at Hawk Mountain. We have a locked cabinet that we have on the back porch at our visitor center, so that when a volunteer comes in, they can stop there before they go up the mountain, pick up the tablet, pick up the telescope, and go up. But that's not always the case when you have a site.
Have people, I've heard that there isn't a lot of space for comments, you know, in Dunkadoo. I've heard complaints from people who read reports on HawkCount saying, you know, how come there's no room for a comment? They like to read a nice lengthy report at the end of the day. And that's often just, you know, abandoned when somebody's using Dunkadoo. So that's a consideration when we're developing this new app, is hopefully we can make space for comments and, you know, species, non-raptor species in particular.
Like if you got an unusual bird, like let's say you got a broadwing hawk at MPG Ranch. I don't know if that's unusual or not, but let's say you did, but you wanted to write some notes about it. It would be hard to do that right on the forum. You could do it on your on a piece of paper and add it later.
And for people who are using it, then are you keeping a data form as well? I know a lot of sites do. Some sites are using, you know, Dunkadoo purely for their hawk watching audience to kind of keep people in the know of what kind of day they're having, and but then they're also using a paper data form. Or is anybody doing both? I would think you'd kind of want a notebook for, you know, for odds and ends regardless, right? Or is everything going into the computer, the tablet?
Well, for Veracruz, we have the phone for Dunkadoo, and there's only one active in each site, and all the other birds, somebody else is having the eBird count. So at the end, everything that was into Dunkadoo is also in eBird, basically. But okay. we don't have we have a notebook just in case like all the systems break, but so far we haven't used it.
Wow, okay. I have heard of some people who aren't happy with Dunkadoo, aren't happy with Trek-Talon, and so they're actually entering directly into HawkCount on their phones, which is pretty clunky. That makes me want us to finish this app as soon as possible, because I can't imagine doing that. Just, you know, it's not a great, looking at HawkCount on your phone. It's not easy. I can't imagine entering. So hopefully we can get this done.
So at MPG,
quickly.
we use paper sheets and then just at the end of the day go into HawkCount. I guess we know about Dunkadoo and we just haven't heard enough about the benefits. Could someone give one or two reasons why? Like, how would you sell me on it?
Well, two things I would say is the data is already mostly entered when you come on down off the mountain in an hourly format. And in the past, we would have to have somebody go back, like a volunteer, and type it in like over the next week and proof it. So it is already entered. All we have to do, what we do when we come down the mountain, is we enter some of the comments sections, which aren't in there at the moment, but you wouldn't have to do that. And then we also upload all the stuff to eBird. So that's a different step. The other really good advantage is if you have Wi-Fi or a capability of that, it can be real time. So people can go and look at HawkCount and say, oh, they're having a good day, or they just had 10 eagles go by, I better get up there. So it seems like people really like seeing that, or even the other sites can see what you're seeing in real time.
Mm-hmm. So letting your audience know what you're seeing in real time and saving time at the end of the day. Does anybody have other benefits to share? Yeah, Esther?
Well, yeah, when you have an hour of more than 100,000 birds or more, it can be really tricky to have like all the numbers together, and more if you just have two people in the count site in that moment. So it can be really tricky, but with Dunkadu that can be really easy to have. So that's also something to think about. And here in Colombia, we use Dunkadu, and at the same time, Iber has in Veracruz for the other species. So that has been really good to have all the data. But also, well, this is the first time that I had a problem with the downloading the data, and I noticed that the the information was like grouped in some days, like for really low days. I don't know the application, or I don't know what happened, just like put together different days. So for the timing, it was very different. So I just could notice that when I download the data and started to work with the days. So, but that just happened once. But the thing is that we need to look for the data after have all the information. You have to check the information, and I could check that also in the tablet. Everything was good, so it was just like an error in the downloaded data. So it has to, like, we could have that tool, but also check all the information to be sure that we are interpreting the information right.
Another advantage, Eric, for especially for sites where there's not a lot of birds. So if you're entering in real time, it gives you a timestamp on that bird, which is kind of an interesting way to get your data. Like if you're doing ages or color morphs of different birds, you'll actually can go back through it and it'll have a time for every single bird if you wanted to look at that precisely, which for us, looking at the times of the different ages of the eagles is something we've done for years, but we always were writing it down on a piece of paper. Now it's like in the computer already.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. Yeah, good point. Yeah, Esther.
Yeah, something that I forgot to mention is that you could change the setup of Dunkadu. And actually, I've been working on that. Like you can add other things to comments, or if you want to have something to a space to comment about other migrants or other birds, you can add that information. But if you work on the setting of the app, so that's possible.
Okay. I'm looking forward to experimenting with it. I think I should get to know it a little bit so I can help people understand it. Carol, do you have other questions about it? I know you were really interested in hearing pros and cons. Has it been a good experience so far?
Well, we're just setting it up, and I think that it's kind of confusing and weird. But the Dunkadoo Carol, her name is, she's been very helpful so far. We're not finished setting it up. So right now it's not working great for us, but I feel like I got some really good information from all you guys. Good positives and a good open eye, view of some of the negatives. And I think we'll maybe have a backup sheet of paper this year and see how it works. But I am happy to hear that HMANA is going to do an app. I think that would be great. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really needed. I think it's just a matter of Jason being able to carve out some time to make it happen. So
Yeah.
we will pass on just people's thoughts on people's eagerness to see it. I think knowing that there are people looking forward to it, especially with this updating glitch that they're facing with new phones, certain phones, that might push things along.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving along to other questions that were submitted. Carol, you were wondering about, do you pay your paid hawk counters for all non-count days, for example, canceled because of weather? We touched on that a little bit already. But yeah, for those of you, I guess everybody here has paid counters. I know seasonal stipends are popular and monthly stipends, but some nonprofits are kind of required to stick to hourly. And I know it's often it's tricky because if you're paying somebody for just the days they're up there, and you get a whole big long batch of crummy weather, that's not fair to the counter at times, so what are people's thoughts on that? Is it mostly hourly that you pay, or is it a monthly or seasonal stipend?
We do an hourly, and we have been paying for every day, whether they're there or not so far, because it seemed fair to them. We have a lot of weather days. But I think my question mostly was to kind of keep up and be competitive with other sites, but not waste money. Does it seem silly to pay for that? But it does seem fair to me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question to compare across the country. And then you have your different, like you said, the different cost of living in certain communities you have to consider. I don't really know what your minimum wage versus our $2,000 a month, whether that's comparable or not, but sounds like it might be if because we're providing housing too.
Might be an interesting question for our next survey, just to gauge that.
Yeah, here in Mexico, we pay them like no matter what, because I mean they're already there, and if it's raining, well, it's raining, but they have to be looking the sky, or even if they're in the house, like waiting for the rain to pass. Once that's over, it can be a flock of any number, and you will miss that. So they can be probably watching a movie while it's raining, and then if it clears up, they will go and jump to the tower and finish the day, or just open for 1 hour, but they still getting paid the whole thing. Like we pay them for the whole month, like it's a monthly pay, and yeah, we just divide the 3 months, and they receive 3 payments basically.
Okay. Yeah. And Carol, do you have another comment, or is?
Well, it's actually, I guess it's a different topic. Has to do with volunteer scheduling.
Yeah, I was planning on jumping into that next, so go ahead.
Oh, okay, good. Sounds good.
Okay, yeah. What scheduling system do you use to schedule volunteers? Online calendars or other? Excel? What do people use? Some sites don't have a lot of scheduling, I would think, while others have, different volunteers for every day of the week. So it's an interesting question. I wish I brought it up at some of the other roundtables where they are, scheduling 20 different volunteers throughout the season or more. But do people have any particular system they use?
For us, it's
Mhm.
Google Drive and it's a Excel sheet, and that has been working very well. So everybody knows, and if they need to do a change, they can ask somebody else, like, "Hey, can you work for me that particular day?" And then they pay to themselves like the days that they have to work. So I think that works very well. Everybody knows where to look, and they have the data there, like the calendar.
Okay.
What was it, an Excel spreadsheet?
Yes, link to Google Drive. Like it's a Google Drive a spreadsheet.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense. So everybody can view it and everybody can edit it.
And it's fairly quick live updating as well.
Oh,
Yeah, I don't have other input on that, Carol. We just use Excel basically, and text, a lot of texting in between counters, who can make it on which days. I'd love to get to the point where we have enough volunteers at our HawkWatch where we need a Google Doc to manage it all. Another question, that was also one of yours, Carol, was what is the length of shift for your volunteers? And you had said, 8 hours is too long. I know at our site as well, we usually break it up into 4-hour shifts, and that seems more doable. There are some days where we rely on volunteers for a full 7 or 8 hours. Just volunteers that have been up at our count site for years and are reliable and they're willing. But I know that's a lot to ask, somebody who's dedicating their time. Anybody have thoughts or comments on that topic?
Well, we operate from our kind of rule of thumb is 10 to 4. We may be a lot like you, Carol, being in the mountains. We're pretty dialed into knowing when the morning flight's going to start, and it's cold mornings here. Birds don't start moving until usually 10. However, with that being said, if the weather is such that it just is exceptionally warm or there's a warm breeze, I'll just text them at 8:30 and say, hey, today may be a 9 o'clock day, or because I actually live north of the site about 20 miles and I can actually see birds moving, like, okay, get to the site because they're going early. But that's like 5 or 10 days a season that they're doing a 9 o'clock start maybe. And if it's a big day, maybe 5 or 6 p.m., but 10 to 4 is the majority. And it's usually really 11 to 2:30.
Oh, okay.
But they are there from 10 to 4 every day.
So Cash says with volunteers, they follow the same schedule as the staff. 10 hours for 2 days, having every third day off. Yeah, that makes sense with the migration that heavy.
We use longer days as well for our volunteers, but we stagger. So as a staff person, I'm usually putting in a 12-hour day and a 10-hour day. So volunteers, we stagger when they're covering. So there'll be 2 people there. One starts earlier, one starts later. So they can be up there for like 7 hours each.
It's definitely a commitment. Which kind of leads into the next question is, which I thought was a really great question that hasn't come up in the last roundtables, but how do you recognize your volunteers and thank them? And it's really, whether you're an organization or you're relying on all, paid counters or volunteers, we just want to make sure people feel valued and are appreciated. So I love that question. I think that speaking for my local site, we provide free access to the state park, throughout the season. They obviously don't have to pay admission every day. And sometimes can donate optics. If they don't have any, usually there's a scope or two we can give to volunteers. We also provide a lot of like end of the season recognition. We give them hats or t-shirts or books this year. And sometimes at our annual meetings, we recognize volunteers with a certificate or some kind of an award. And I think free memberships to your organization is a great way. If you have a membership, set up, or, if you have an associated organization. Yeah, other thoughts? I think just making sure that they're, that you thank them often goes a long way. Do other people have thoughts of how they thank their volunteers? Esther?
Yeah, we give them the recognitions and also like a certificate, and of course a t-shirt that they can choose like any model they want, and we pay them. Like it's not a payment, but it's just at least for food, that's something that can cover the food for them.
Yeah,
Plus
that's
house.
huge. That's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, Esther?
Yeah, we give them a certification. And also if they are committed for a long period of time, maybe a t-shirt like one of these. And also housing and food when possible, when we have the room for them.
Great. All right, other thoughts? Anybody else have anything else to add on that?
Well, we throw a picnic at the end of the season. Everybody comes and we provide some food and cook out burgers and stuff.
Mhm.
But so far, that's what we've done. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what we do as well.
Mm.
That's great. Well, those were the questions we received. But if people have other things they want to raise, anybody have any questions? Things that have come up during this session that they want to discuss? I know one topic that's been pretty popular is just talking about the change in raptor movements and seeing kind of just wind patterns changing overall. I know it's affecting some sites more than others, but certainly sites are reporting not seeing as many birds over the recent years due to change in wind patterns and climate changes, or just seeing birds later than they're used to. Anybody have any thoughts on that? Yep, Cash?
Yeah, about that, we noticed the change, like more winds from the east pushing birds inland, and that you will see that now the numbers in Cardell are getting lower, and Chichik actually is like having most. And this year we were able to have another level at the observatory, and that was really good. Now we can see like really nice the west, as it used to be like probably 20 years ago, because the trees were growing a lot in the town, and we lost in the last year we lost some of the view to the west, and we finally were able now to recover it again. So that was really nice. And we leave some space for the people that were visiting the counting station as well. So it was a win-win.
I definitely have heard of more east winds in general from people. A lot more just, you know, lasting longer and fewer, you know, for fall sites anyway, fewer cold fronts, fewer winds from the northwest, or when they do get northwest winds or north winds in the right conditions, it's often for shorter periods of time, you know, and not, you know, for a week or more like it used to be. So it's, you know, can be concerning for some sites that are really not seeing, you know, there's always the ups and downs of big broadwing years or low broadwing years. And but it seems more concerning to some sites who really are seeing an overall change, you know, in the last 10 years. And the questions even come up at a number of sites, just whether or not they want to move their sites, because they're, you know, not seeing a lot of the birds they used to. And is it still valuable data? And you know, it is from a HMANA a data perspective, we want them to continue, because those low data days or years, that's just as useful information as all those big years, obviously. But it's tough because if people are, you know, out there volunteering their time and not seeing much, it's hard to ask people to keep doing that. It's tricky. So I know one thing that's come up is potentially asking people to pick a site B, like an exploratory site, and count at both sites simultaneously if they have, you know, enough volunteers, rather than abandon their primary site. But Carol, you have a question or comment?
I have a question. Will HMANA then do some sort of special analysis to kind of help to determine whether these things are due to climate change? I mean, how does that work into the analysis of things to help us to know as well what we're seeing, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe Laura, you want to speak to that. I know a lot more research is incorporating weather data most recently.
Yeah, I mean, it's something we need to do some research on about how, first of all, how are weather patterns changing and how is that affecting the birds is the second part of that question. So if it is leading to different migration patterns, we might be able to detect that in long-term telemetry data, but that's still something that has to be done. Or maybe possibly looking at how the hawk counts vary across where we have long-term sites. But yeah, RPI analysis, we're going to be doing another trend analysis next year. So I'm hoping we'll be able to look possibly at weather as at least wind patterns as one variable to see if that helps us fine tune the trends a little bit. Yeah, it's an area that we need some more research, and finding a few grad students to examine those kind of detailed questions would be great.
Just taking a few notes here. Other thoughts of people? Go ahead, Eric. You're in the
still
dark.
on video, but it's getting dark. We're kind of on the opposite side of things at MPG, where and it's too early really to say how much climate change is. You know, we've only been doing it for 12 years. So it's hard to say. But with that being said, I do think there are some tumultuous, especially in the fall, weather patterns that have emerged as in the last 6, 7, 8 years, where late September, early October are the other count sites in Montana, Jewel Basin, Bridger, get these crazy snow events that'll shut those sites down for up to a week sometimes. And that MPG, we're a low valley, north-south valley site. We're down at the lowest elevation along the river, and those are our biggest days. So it's just interesting. And I really also, with that being said, appreciate the fact that we have this kind of dual comparison with a few ridgeline sites, and then ours being a low, especially with Jewel Basin, we can really have a nice comparison. If they're not up counting, we're getting like 4,000 birds a day, which is really, off the charts for us. So I do think that maybe climate change is actually, I hate to say it, but improving our count.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. Okay, other thoughts on that topic? Anybody else noticing any major changes?
Well, not noticing, but I want to just to add that people in the other counting sites, if they're noticing a decrease, I will say don't give up, because we don't know what is going to be in 10 years or 15 years, and then with the continuity is only with the long term you will know what is happening. This thing that just Eric mentioned is great. Is the kind of information that we are just getting, and it's because we are counting every fall. And if we move, we're gonna lose probably data. So I will say, if people want to explore a second area, I will keep always the place that is being on record, and just have a second one. Try to make the effort to support another counting station, but keeping always the previous one.
Yes, absolutely. We need your long-term data.
I guess I would also add to that too, if there's volunteers or fresh newbie counters that kind of need, I don't know, some information, or need to keep the excitement alive. Let's say a site is experiencing a drought in numbers for years, just as head counters, as HMANA, as whoever, just putting that in perspective, hammering that into perspective about how important it is, and maybe even incorporating more okay, it's a slow day, let's keep our eyes to the sky like we should, but let's also do some e-birding and note some other birds, or I don't, just frame it in a way that, I know it's challenging, especially if it's going on for 10 years at a site where your volunteers are just my eyes are burning, I'm not seeing anything. But anything we can do as counters at the site to just keep it fresh, keep it real, keep it exciting, even if it's not for raptors, other birds, other whatever. I don't know if we tie people into eBird and all the cool maps that they're doing, but just keeping things fresh in terms of changes.
Yeah, I like it. There's one other question I wanted to bring up. Esther, I'm sorry, I totally forgot. I skipped over a question that you had submitted about land use. And you were wondering about the permanence of the count sites on private lands, and if this is the case for other hawk watches and how they manage it. I know from what we learned from our site survey was that about 30% of hawk watches, of the half of the hawk watches we heard from, 30% are on private lands and 70% are public. And I think either way, no matter where your hawk watch is, you're going to be faced with a lot of challenges. So if people have any comments on that, Cash, go ahead.
Yeah, here in Veracruz, like we have Gardel is in a hotel. The owner is being really nice for the period we've been. He asked us to move. I forgot, I think was 2011 or 12, I forgot. So we didn't count for that hotel, and we moved to another hotel that was also in the town. And in Chichicaxtla, the situation is slightly different. The place where we have the building is not public, but belongs to the town. Is I think is ejido. You know that is a landlordship. I think that's the word. So it's basically a group of agricultural group that has a lot of land in the town, and they are the owners of the soccer field, the baseball field, and we are choosing between those two fields. And they like every 3 years we have to sign an agreement so we can continue. So my recommendation for any organization that wants to make a long term, like make all the possible first, like run all the alternatives, but try to buy a land, because like we don't know if one day the people in Chichicaxtla won't have us, and we won't be able to count from them. And something I've been like trying to figure out is to buy a piece of land for Pro Natura, so that way if anything happened with the town, we can continue counting from there and keeping the data. But yeah, I will totally like try, like we have to look at least for the safest place that won't harm the long term.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a real concern. Esther, go ahead.
Yeah, my question was because actually this season we have an issue about that. We also have the campsite in a private land, and the owner didn't want to have us in that place this year. So it was like, okay, what you can say about that? I mean, if the owner doesn't want it, you can do it. So we have to move, not very far from this area, but it's a big issue there. So that's why it's my question. So do you consider that it is better to have your own land, like Kash is saying, or what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, that's very tricky. You know, I know writing up some kind of agreement, it's tricky when it's a private landowner. You know, I know like MOUs or coming up with some kind of contract might be useful. I don't know if it's like is it just a landowner, or is it a business, or who are you, whose land is it, Esther?
It's just an owner. It's not a business or
Landowner.
anything like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
it's a landowner that doesn't live close to the area. And
mhm.
he lives in another town really far. So it was impossible to talk to him, actually, because he's never in the area. So that's the thing.
That's really tricky. The other thing I will mention, I don't know if it would do any good in your situation, but I just wanted to let everyone know that I can always write letters of support for your Hawkwatch. If you think it may not do any good in terms of reaching a private landowner, but if you're ever looking for a letter of support from HMANA, to help you get funding or to help you kind of justify the contribution your data is having to the monitoring network, anything like that, we're happy to help with. Cash, do you have something to add?
Yeah, I will say, like, is there like any close university or school that you can engage that program with them, so you can count in their roof, or maybe like in the Palacio Municipal, like something that you can think is more public, or with a chance to have a more secure area. That I know it's a hard situation, but just thinking in options.
Yeah, well, actually, we've been exploring the whole area, trying to find another place. But in the area that we are right now, that's not even a town. It's like just a few houses in the area and a small school, but it's not like a good place to have a really good view. And actually, the population there is really engaged with the education program. And we spoke with local leaders, and they tried to talk with the landowners and trying to find another place, but it was really hard. Even for them, we couldn't find that other place. Yeah, so that's the problem there, and that's why I'm trying to explore different areas. Like I was exploring very close to that area, but now I'm just moving around the whole valley trying to find another place. So yeah, has been really difficult actually.
I think,
I'm sorry you're dealing with that. Go ahead, Lori.
and I think for both Veracruz and US Start, you want a place where you can bring people, because you're hoping to use tourism as part of your funding mechanism. So that's got to be more difficult for private lands.
Yeah, that's another thing to consider actually. For spring, we also are in a private land, but it's with a company, and they are more open to talk about that. Yeah, so I think we can manage that. But in this area that I'm saying for fall, it's like very different scenario. So I'm just trying to figure it out how to manage that.
Well, please let us know if you can think of anything, Esther. And we're happy to help in however we can. Does anybody have any other comments or questions that they can think of? I can think of just one maybe closing question. Thanks for hanging on for so long, guys. This has been really great, but I'm just wondering if anybody has any ways they can think of for HMANA to help and better support their HawkWatch site, in addition to what Eric brought up about potentially creating some materials or video for better engagement. We have our HawkWatch fund, our grants, research grants also, and we're considering some signage for sites in the coming year. We have banners for International Hawk Migration Week. If people have other ideas, I think more training, getting involved with training might be a good idea. But other thoughts on how we can better engage with sites? Go ahead, Esther.
I've been thinking in kind of exchange between the count sites. That will be something to foster the interest of people in become a counter, at least here in Colombia. Like, for example, a girl that is now assistant here, the idea is that she goes to Veracruz next year. So that's going to be like an example for the rest of the people here, like, oh, she go to Veracruz. But it would be nice to have that for with Panama, Belize, United States, and all the other countries, but that's something really like to have a system, something like that.
Right. That would be excellent. Great idea. Cash, go ahead.
Yeah, I will we try with the list, and then we just lost contact with Ryan. I think he was so busy and we couldn't finish that. So one of the original idea was to bring one counter from Veracruz to Belize, and they will send one for here. So, and the idea is like have that, like encourage people, and local people will say, oh yeah, let's go. And I think it's really nice, because one day probably you're going to be counting in MPG, or probably you will be counting in Panama. Like having that as a key to just encourage that that mood of being a counter, and being part of something really important, which is monitoring the raptor migration in the global scale. So I think will be something that HMANA can help a lot, and we can try to plan on skiing more on this. And I was thinking also, probably it will be like a huge challenge because we're so many count sites, but maybe if there is a few, or we can make a clusters of count sites that have the similar starting period, we can have like a gathering, even if it's by Zoom. Like we can just put a projector and have a gathering, and say like some words from HMANA to the crew that is going to be counting that year. So that probably can be something nice, like to have a in-person approach, even if it's by Zoom, with the like that, having that connection with HMANA. Yeah.
I like that. Good idea.
Mhm.
Oh, I would love to start an exchange program, and really it would be great to support more field biologists too, and maybe get more people interested. So yeah, I love it. Anyone else have anything to add about that, or any closing comments? I took a lot of notes. I'm excited to write something up on everything we discussed. And Eric, go ahead, Eric.
Oh, I just was gonna say I need to run, but I wanted to offer just a quick little story of hope, a little anecdote. I know that you know, long-term change is a slow progress, but just in turn, I guess what I want to say is I really appreciate what HMANA does and all of you. And to bounce off of that, when I first started counting at MPG back in 2010, it was a spring count, and the only other site near us was Dinosaur Ridge. And I was on HMANA every day looking at Dinosaur's numbers and comparing it to ours, and it was really close in terms of phenology and timing and everything. And I just really appreciated that. And I'm not high up necessarily in MPG, but by comparing those numbers, I was able to offer to my supervisor a reason why we should continue this count, and then the fall, and then the spring, and here we are in 2022, doing both spring and fall. The count is a success. And so I just wanted to say like that those little things help. And HMANA, you know, just having the sites, like that was a big part of why we're even counting right now. So I just wanted to say that, and just that I appreciate everything that everyone does. And it was really nice to meet you all. And I do have to go. And even though it was only 7 of us for a time being, like, you know, I just met Cash a month and a half ago. I know Jamie Belt really well from just college. So it's just really cool. And I don't know if Lori, you remember, but I showed up one day and counted with you years ago. So just great to see everyone, and appreciate everything you do.
You too, and
Me
good to see
too.
everybody.
Yeah, that was a
See you.
great, yeah. I appreciate your words, Eric. That makes me feel really good. I'm glad your count is what it is now. And yeah, let's keep the connection going. I would love to connect with you guys regularly, and just hear more of what you're doing. And thanks so much for all your great work and counting effort. We so appreciate it.